Hey, I feel like garbage because I'm on chemo this week, but I want to talk about Torah because that's what I do on Thursdays. I got my handy JPS Jewish Study Bible here, which is usually where I start with the Parsha each week, and then access other commentaries as needed to compose a blog post about this. When I read the text, I ask myself two questions. And the first question is, what does it say on the page? And of course, when I ask the question, what does it say on the page, and I read the text to see what it says, I'm reading through a translated tradition, right? So that this is the JPS translation, closely follows the New Revised Standard version of the NRSV. The NRSV is in an updated edition, NRSV UE. The JPS and NRSV are very closely, they follow very similar principles of translation. So if you have like an Oxford annotated version, your Oxford annotated Bible is going to read really similarly to my JPS Jewish Study Bible. So that's just a note on translation, but I'm not translating the original material. I'm not reading the original language. So when I say, what does the text say, I'm already aware that there are decisions, editorial and translated decisions between me and the original material. So we always have to hold that in mind. But one question to ask is, well, what does the text say on the page? In Ki Tavo, this Torah portion, the Parsha for this week, when you enter the land, there's a series of blessings and curses for how you got to stay in the land. So when I say, well, what does the text say on the page? It says, well, you're entering the land. Here's some stuff you got to do. Here's a series of blessings and curses that the priests are supposed to pronounce over the people to remind us of the covenant with God to stay in the land. That's what it says. That's what the text says. That's what this Torah portion is about. But the second question I ask is, why does it say what it says? And when we ask the question about why does it say what it says, my preferred approach here is to decouple what the text says from any story about divine transmission. There certainly is a way to read this text that says, well, there was a story of divine transmission from God to Moses at Sinai. There was a handing down of Torah, and then you get both a written law and an oral law tradition that then stems from that. So one thing to say is like, well, why does the text say? Well, it's Hashem wanted it to say that, right? God wanted it to say it. Through divine transmission, God said, hey, Moses, here's what this is about. So I think if you have divine transmission, the project becomes about how do you best interpret what God intended in speaking this material. But that isn't my view, right? My view is that we have a human authored source tradition where they were human authors all the way down, human editors, human redactors that ultimately bring together Torah in a late exilic or early post-exilic phase. So the human story is going to have us asking different why questions, right? So if we say, well, why was this text written in the way the text was written, and we don't have God as an explanation, we have human authors as an explanation, then that opens up new avenues for research. So we have a series of blessings and curses. Now, here's what we learn about. Here's a couple of points I want to make. Blessings and curses closely model two other traditions. One, and this is kind of recovered through the Treaty of Esarhaddon. You can look that up, the Treaty of Esarhaddon. This is dated by archaeologists and scholars to 672 before the Common Era. This is in the 7th century BCE, or 7th century before the Common Era. That coheres with exactly the same time of composition of the earliest material that exists within the book of Deuteronomy, where this week's Torah Parsha portion is from. So what that leads us to believe is that the authors of this core material in Deuteronomy, the core material are chapters 12 through 26 in Deuteronomy, those chapters, that book of the law, there 12 to 26, closely follows other ancient Southwest Asian political or state treaties. It just is flipping out your oath of loyalty, switching out the oath of loyalty to a political sovereign, now to a divine sovereign. So it's like, hey, ancient Israel, you're taking an oath of loyalty to God, and that God is the divine sovereign, is really using the political vassal state treaty model and putting God in place of the political leader. So that kind of formulaic approach to the text helps us understand why it was written in a certain way. And then also the Code of Hammurabi, and another early ancient Southwest Asian legislative code, also follows some of this blessing and curses model. So we say that we see the ancient authors of Deuteronomy are really using other cultural traditions that are alive and well at the same time of composition. State treaties and the legislative code of Hammurabi show up in the influence of this work The other thing that I want to say about why is the text told in the way that it's told is that we don't have a Mount Sinai tradition in some of the earliest portions of Deuteronomy. Rather, we have an oath of loyalty that's taken following this treaty, but Sinai's not in there. And in fact, some core components of Exodus aren't even in there in the earliest material of Deuteronomy. So what this suggests to us is heavy editing over time. And with the Sinai material in particular, we think that anything that's referring to Sinai and some of the core material of Deuteronomy is a very late addition. And what that suggests to us is that ancient Israel as a people had different experiences, different collective memories. And a minority group had a Sinai experience, whatever that means, right? Whether that they actually had some physical experience in the world at some mountain, or if this constructed narrative to explain an origin of the law, either way seems to be a minority view within ancient Israel. And then at a late addition in the text, late exilic or early post-exilic, this Sinai experience is incorporated into Torah, but it wasn't there in the earliest material of the book of Deuteronomy. So when we ask, why was this told in the way it was told, the answer in this Parsha, at any rate, seems to be, one, that ancient Israel and the scribes and composers of this material are patterning the earliest material after another state or political treaty. And the other answer to the why question is that Sinai is brought in as a very late addition in order to maybe appease or at least integrate or incorporate a minority view into a broader view of Torah. But the majority view probably did not have a Sinai tradition. There's a smaller group that has a Sinai tradition that then gets incorporated into the material. So that's a little bit about what the Parsha is about, and a little bit about why the text was composed in the way the text was composed. So I'm going to write a blog post about this probably later today. So if you want to read about that, you can follow me on the blogs. But there's just a quick 7-minute version of what I'll write a longer post about. Okay, it's chemo week, and I feel like garbage. But not so much like garbage that I can't be here to talk about Torah. Much love, fam. Peace out.